Voyager 2 probe after a heartbeat signal was picked up. Contact with the spacecraft launched in 1977.
It began with silence. Not the everyday silence of a quiet room, but the deep, ancient stillness of space. The kind that has no wind, no breath, no heartbeat. Out there, in the black between the stars, Voyager 2 had been gliding for decades, carrying with it the faint warmth of the sun, like a memory that was slowly fading. It was launched in 1977, a fragile thing of wires, dish, and gold, with a mission to never return. It had been our arrow, fired into the unknown, promised to travel outward forever, a wanderer that would never again feel the pull of home. It had passed the giants of our solar system like a pilgrim through an endless cathedral. Jupiter, its storms the size of worlds, twisting and boiling like a living canvas. Saturn, its rings sharp and bright, spinning around it like a frozen halo. Uranus and Neptune, lonely and blue, drifting at the very edge of the light. And then Voyager 2 had stepped beyond, into the wild country between the stars. No human eye would ever see it again, except in dreams. Its path was set, or so we thought. The first sign was small enough to ignore, a whisper caught by deep space listening posts. A faint, uneven pulse that did not belong. Technicians stared at the telemetry, expecting a glitch, but the pattern persisted. It was not drifting. It was not broken. Something in its path had changed, and the change was deliberate. The antenna was turning. Slowly and possibly, Voyager 2 was rotating, not tumbling aimlessly, but moving with purpose. And then it became undeniable. It was turning back. The news moved faster than light could. First among astronomers, then through headlines, then spilling into every glowing screen across the planet. People read the words again and again because they didn't make sense. Voyager 2 is coming back. It was absurd. The spacecraft had barely enough power left to keep itself alive. The safest course was always forward, away from the sun, stretching its life as far as it would go. Turning back meant burning precious energy. Turning back meant ending sooner. And yet it was happening. The effect on Earth was unlike anything in living memory. This was not the chaos of politics or the shock of disaster. This was something older, quieter, but far heavier. A machine launched before many of us were born was moving with the grace of intention, as though answering a call we could not hear. People who had never cared about space before found themselves watching updates from NASA as though they were tracking the pulse of the planet itself, the heartbeat of something vast. In the control rooms, engineers leaned over their consoles, watching the thrusters fire in tiny bursts. There was no wobble, no panic in the movement, only precision. The dish, for so long pointed toward the deep unknown, was now facing back toward the star it had left, back toward us. Somewhere inside that ancient craft was the golden record we had sent, a greeting for anyone it might meet. Songs, words, images, the heartbeat of humanity itself pressed into metal. For years, we thought that record was meant for someone out there. But now it felt as though it might be returning for us. The world reacted like it was holding its breath. Scientists argued about possibilities, but none of the explanations erased the strangeness of it. Religious leaders spoke of signs and meanings. Children whispered that maybe it had found something, and it was coming home to tell us. Artists painted it as a silver arrow curving back toward a blue jewel. Musicians composed pieces that rose slowly, as if mirroring its long, deliberate turn. The story spread into places where no telescope could reach, tiny villages, polar research stations, desert camps, becoming something close to myth. It was more than a maneuver. It was a reversal of the oldest human story, that once you leave home, you never return. And yet, here was our own creation, billions of kilometers away, deciding otherwise. There was something ancient in that gesture, like a bird on the wing turning back to the shore it had left behind. No sound, no image, only a thread of data, ones and zeros, that carried across the void and tied us to it again. In that moment, the noise of the world seemed to fade. The turn had begun. No one knew exactly when it happened, but the turning of Voyager 2 stopped being just news and became something else, an obsession. Updates from NASA came like tides, sparse, careful, never enough to quench the hunger. People began setting alarms to catch late-night briefings, leaning close to radios and live streams like they were listening to a loved one whisper from far away. At first, the scientists clung to logic. They spoke of software errors, cosmic rays corrupting its memory, maybe a mechanical fault causing the rotation. But the precision of the turns shattered those theories. Voyager 2 was not spinning wildly. It was aligning, calculating, adjusting. Whatever was happening was not random. It was deliberate. And then came the signal. It was faint, so faint it almost drowned in the cosmic static. A pulse, not part of any transmission schedule. It didn't carry images or the usual engineering data. It carried something stranger. The frequency wasn't one Voyager had used before. It was narrow, repeating in intervals, too precise to be an accident. Some said it sounded like a heartbeat. Others swore it was music. The media exploded. Networks replayed the sound over and over, slowing it down, analyzing the pitch, mapping it into visual patterns. People claimed to hear voices hidden inside, whispers buried in the hiss. Linguists, mathematicians, musicians, all tried to decode it, but the truth was harder to pin down. The signal wasn't a language we understood, but it felt familiar. Theories multiplied like stars. Some said Voyager 2 had encountered something in the darkness, something that changed its mission. A derelict alien craft, a beacon from another civilization. A warning. Others thought it was no discovery at all, but a response, a command sent back to it by someone or something beyond our system. There were even those who believed it was us, that in some distant, future timeline, we had learned how to speak across the ages and had whispered into our own past. Governments began to take notice. Observatories reported sudden interest from agencies that had never cared about deep space probes before. Funding requests that had been ignored for years were suddenly approved overnight. Dishes that had been gathering dust were turned skyward again, their massive bowls catching the thin, faraway breath of a machine older than most of the people listening. And all the while, Voyager 2 kept moving. It didn't accelerate, didn't rush. It crept, as if knowing the journey back would take longer than any of us could imagine. But that was part of the spell it cast. We didn't need it to arrive tomorrow. We needed it to be coming. The knowledge that it was on its way was enough to ignite something in us we had almost forgotten. Patience, wonder, and the aching beauty of anticipation. People began gathering in strange, quiet vigils. Beaches at night, rooftops in the city, mountaintops in the cold, all facing the same invisible point in the sky. Not to see it. It was far beyond the reach of the naked eye, but to feel connected to the path it traced. Children who had never heard of Voyager before now drew it in chalk on sidewalks, its dish like a silver flower aimed at the stars. Somewhere deep inside the control rooms, the data kept flowing, battery levels dropping, heat leaking away into the void. They knew it couldn't last forever. One day the signal would falter, but until then, every flicker of telemetry felt like a heartbeat that belonged to all of humanity. And as the days passed, one question began to grow louder than all the rest. It wasn't how or why it had turned back. It was, what had it seen out there that made it come home? It began subtly, shifts in the signal that no one noticed at first. The heartbeat-like pulses stretched, changed pitch, almost like speech. The analysts were exhausted, eyes red from staring at endless streams of numbers. But when they overlaid the signal with its own earlier transmissions, something startling emerged. It wasn't random at all. It was evolving. The patterns grew more complex, looping back on themselves, weaving into shapes too intricate for simple machine error. One by one, the scientists stopped calling it noise and started calling it messages. Not that they could read them, but the intent. There was something undeniable in the way they repeated, adjusted, as if trying to be understood. Then, without warning, Voyager 2 transmitted an image. It was low resolution, distorted, smeared by decades of cosmic wear, but the moment it appeared on the monitors, the room fell silent. It wasn't a picture of stars, it wasn't a planet, or the familiar blackness of interstellar space. It was something else. The shape in the image was vast, coiled in shadow, lit by a pale glow that seemed to come from nowhere. It didn't look like a ship, or an asteroid, or any known object cataloged by astronomy. Some said it looked alive. Others said it looked older than anything we had a right to witness. The longer you stared at it, the more wrong it felt, like it wasn't meant for human eyes at all. In the days that followed, Voyager 2 kept sending fragments, blurry frames, incomplete scans, and more of that haunting signal. People argued endlessly about what it meant. Some insisted it was a warning, a danger lurking in the dark. Others believed it was an invitation, a call to follow. But a small, quiet group feared something different, that it wasn't calling us to it at all. It was telling us to prepare. The turning of the probe, the slow return, it all began to feel like more than a mission change. It felt like an escort, like it wasn't just coming back to us, it was bringing something with it. Governments started to act strangely. Information that had been public for decades became classified overnight. Amateur astronomers who claimed to detect faint objects trailing the path of Voyager 2 found their posts deleted, their channels suddenly offline. The world's attention was being pulled in 100 other directions, but for those who were paying attention, the silence from official channels was louder than any announcement. Still, the probe drew closer. Its distance was measured in light hours now instead of days, then minutes. The final transmissions were rushed, as if its systems were straining against time itself. The heartbeat signal grew louder, steadier, until it filled entire data streams. And then it stopped. One last pulse, one last flicker of telemetry, and silence. No shutdown message, no farewell. Just gone. For weeks, nothing came from the void where it had been. But somewhere out there, in the space between planets, something was moving. A faint object barely detectable, not on any predicted trajectory. No official body confirmed it. No press conference was held, but every so often in the quiet hours before dawn, you could hear it whispered by those who still watch the skies. Voyager 2 came home, but it didn't come alone.